Okay, hello everybody. Got a lot to get through, so I'm going to start without delay. I'm Hugh Simpson-Wells, founder of Ops Computer Group, and this is the last in a four-part series on how Identity Management Suite can replace MIM when the time is right and provide many additional benefits in the meantime. This one then is entitled Getting Control Over Groups, and part of the theme of these webinars has been MIM replacement, and of course that's one of the things that MIM did for us, the portal did for us, was to give us a certain amount of control over Active Directory groups in particular. We talked then in the last webinars about the fact that there are a number of applications in the Identity Panel suite. We first of all talked about Identity Panel, which is a foundational piece. It's needed by all the others. It's what connects to various systems. It scans the data that's there, it stores that data, and it stores an entire history of the data, presents a joined up view of each identity, provides the reporting and the workflow needed by the other applications. So in our simple setup, we've got an HR system, we've got AD and Azure AD. Our focus today is going to be more on Azure AD, simply because that's where a lot of groups live, but it would work with AD, it would work with any system that has groups. We think of silos. Again, we won't be making too much of silos on this occasion, but this is the data being kept historically for each of the systems we're connecting to. The second webinar was about Hypersync Panel. So this was about synchronizing that data, taking sets of attributes and flowing between the different silos, or rather from silos to target systems, I suppose you'd say, provisioning and deprovisioning objects. Had the idea of a hyperverse, just like the metaverse. Super fast, full sync's quite normal. The kind of troubles that we had with the MIM sync engine can be consigned to the dustbin of history. Great simulation debugging options and uniqueness requirements handled internally, password sync as well. So a complete replacement. So we're taking data from the different silos and we're pushing it out to wherever it needs to go. Next, we talked about Service Panel. This was last week, and that's about exposing data to users. Now, in Access Panel, we also expose data to users, and you'll see a lot of similar sort of forms and so on in use. And with Service Panel, we're defining custom forms which can pull data from any of these silos, and depending on actions that you take within the forms, we might send an email, we might interface with ServiceNow, we might push data out into other silos. We can interact with the hyperverse, something you couldn't do in MIM, so we can pull data from the hyperverse and push it back in. We can also have entirely separate silos for handling things that aren't handled by our HR system, for example, temporary staff or whatever. Now we're going to talk about Access Panel. Access Panel is a complete governance solution. So it provides such things as attribute-based access control, role-based access control, just-in-time access, or privileged identity management, sort of things that are tied up somewhat together. It'll also do access reviews, so that's attestation, certification, recertification of the entitlements that people have. Now, entitlements are often groups, and it's groups that I'm going to be talking about today. But I want to make the point that any kind of entitlement can be managed. It's very flexible. Access Panel and Identity Panel, very flexible in the way that entitlements are defined. So if the entitlement is given in a system just by an attribute on a user, could be a multi-value attribute, or it could be a common separated attribute, something like that. Or if there is a formal role model, a formal application role, like in SAP, for example, it's possible to configure it so that they're presented as entitlements. They all end up looking like groups, a lot like groups. They all look like a thing with memberships. And so in talking about group memberships, I don't want to exclude those, I just take them as being part of the deal. And there are different ways we can manage those entitlements. The first obvious ones are just manual or query-based. And of course, you can do that in Azure, and we used to be able to do it in the MIM portal. So very parallel to those. A difference would be that with the query-based ones in Access Panel, you can have exceptions, which we'll come to. And then there is more formal methods of managing entitlements. So role-based access control, attribute-based access control, both of which I'll say a little bit more about shortly, and as I say, exceptions. Then you can have just-in-time access. So we can set up candidate membership in a variety of ways, which I'll show you. And we can give people just-in-time access on a self-serve basis. That might be as simple as saying, I need that access now, and you get it for a period of time. Could be that there's an approval involved. We can have quite complicated chains of approvals, which I won't be showing you because there's just too much of it. You might want to have an extension, for example, or it might be that it needs to be escalated. Ultimately, they might expire. So there'll always be a time associated with them. On expiry, you unfortunately simply don't get the access you asked for. There, you can have justification forms which can be enforced. You can have multiple people being able to respond. So all the things I think you might expect. It also provides a small amount of support for native criteria. Azure Dynamic Groups we can't control because they're controlled by Azure, but we might still want to review access and see what the access is and so on. So I'll show you, give you that idea as well. And then separation of duties, the straightforward idea that you can make two entitlements mutually exclusive. And I've already mentioned criteria-based candidacy. Then there is the whole business of reviews. So we can have access reviews that are performed either against security principles, like users and groups, according to the applications that use them. We can do reviews of role assignments. I'll have more to say about that in a moment. And they can be rolling, continuous reviews. They can be recurring every quarter, every 6 months, whatever, ad hoc, just a one-off, or they can be triggered by a change. So if for example, we were to see, we can put risk levels against roles, for example. If a role were to move up a risk level, that could trigger an attestation. Access Panel, as with all the other applications, requires Identity Panel for its connectivity, data workflows, and so on. Now, so if we view this diagrammatically, what we're saying is that we've still got the same setup, we've still got the same basis, we've got our providers, or connectors if you prefer, we've got our silos. Now what we're doing is pulling data from them and configuring all sorts of roles, rules, reviews, separation of duties, and so on. There is a process, a synchronization process, which crunches the data and as a result, sends entitlements out to wherever they're needed. We can request and approve entitlements. We have privileged access management then as well, so that if you like the temporary elevation of privileges. We've got access reviews over here on the right, where through email and through portals, we can give people tasks to perform as part of access reviews. Now, before I go into a demo, I need to set it up a bit because there's an awful lot of it. It's complicated to look at. Now, we already know that we've got our users. We've scanned the various systems and we've got our users into the system. These will be different kinds of users that need different kinds of entitlements. The entitlement, well, we talk about resources. I've already mentioned that resources, I will only be looking at groups, but they could equally be attributes, roles, whatever it is that we can configure, very flexible in the way that these can be configured. They all end up looking like groups. And those groups, resources, whatever they are, let's call them resources, are going to be used by various applications. So various applications are going to get their permissions, can decide who can do what by looking at those either groups or attributes, whatever it is, at these resources. And so it's of interest for us to define applications within Access Panel and then say, well, look, I'm interested in all the groups that relate to Workday, or all the groups that relate to some legacy app, all the AD groups that relate to some legacy app. I'm not going to talk about applications today, but that's another possible feature. Then how do we manage the access? Well, lots of ways. First, a rather trivial one, which is the resource might be externally managed. So an Azure Dynamic Group would be an externally managed group. It's still of interest. I would just note it for the moment. Then we can have criteria-based rules. That's really attribute-based access control. Everybody in this department has this group membership or this resource assigned to them. And that, of course, is really what you get in Azure. It's just that we get some additional options, as you'll see, and it's also what you had in the MIM portal, but we can have exceptions. So if you've got a rule, a simple criterion, but sometimes you just need to give somebody who doesn't fit the pattern access for a period of time perhaps, or you want to exclude somebody that does fit the rules for some reason. You can do that, you can have exceptions. Next, you can define roles. Now, these roles are purely defined within Access Panel. They are, if you like, enterprise roles. They are the different roles we can identify that we might want to associate with people. And we can associate those with the resources and with the users. So it's a mixing matrix. It gives us a way of saying who should have which resources based on roles, and we can give those roles sensible names that mean something to the people managing them. Straightforward, role-based access control. If you've seen it elsewhere, you wouldn't be surprised by what you see in Access Panel. I'm not going to be talking about role-based access control. It is just a little bit too complicated. As you'll see, there's a lot to show you already. We can have separation of or segregation of duties. So that is simply defining incompatible entitlements. Then we can have user request. And this is quite a big topic. And you had a certain amount of self-service, of course, in MIM, in the MIM portal, and you can have a certain amount of self-service going on in Azure as well. Here we can have the idea of request with an approval. We can have complicated approval chains, so that is escalations, alternatives, that kind of thing. We can define candidate members so that only candidate members can request. And that leads us to the possibility of a pure self-service where you simply say, I want this access now, and I don't even have to have approval for it. Just gives us a way of, just like in Azure, where you can elevate your capabilities through just-in-time roles, same kind of idea. Of course, these will tend to be time limited. And you can have the possibility of extensions as well. Now, that gives you a flavor of the different ways in which we can manage which users have access to which resources and hence what they can do in the various applications. But then there is the whole business of campaigns. So this is another dimension, if you like, of any governance tool, really. And what we're saying here is that we can have campaigns to attest, review, or attest, certify, or recertify, depending on your language, review, if you like, the entitlements of, well, it could be users, it could be all users in a department. It could be entitlements. You could be saying, I want to look at all of the resources associated with some application, or it could be roles. I want to look at all the critical risk roles. And so there are various targets, and then there are various, if you like, filters, filter by application, by risk level, by department, and then we can handle that through a portal, through the Access Panel portal, or via email. We'll see both of those. And what you do with it is, in many cases, you'll just remediate it because Access Panel is in charge of it. If Access Panel isn't in charge of it, for example, an Azure Dynamic Group, then we might simply want to report on it. So hopefully that's set up the general idea. And we're now going to take a look at a few groups in Azure, how they're viewed in Access Panel, how we configure them, and some of the things that we can do with them. And then we'll go on briefly to look at campaigns. So I've got a few slightly oddly named groups here, and they're named according to how they behave. It just makes it easier for me and probably for you to understand what's going on. Now, I'll come back to these in just a moment, but we've got things like a request membership group and a self-service just-in-time group and so on. For the moment, I think if we were to look at any of these, and I won't go into all of them because it'll take a while, but if we look at any of them, we will see that there is no membership, no current membership. If I look at this one, I think similarly we'll see no current membership. In fact, of these four, none of them does. But what you will see is they've all got the same owner, Frodo Baggins. Okay, let's now go and see what that looks like in Access Panel. So as you will be aware, Identity Panel, as you'll be aware from previous webinars, Identity Panel sucks this information in, scans the information, and so it's able to present us with a list of users. We can define a list of applications. I won't be using these, but I just mentioned them. We can define roles. I won't be using these either. But importantly, we can also bring in resources. As I say, the resources we're going to be dealing with are groups, And these groups are handled just like users. They're scanned in from AD or Azure AD or anywhere else they come from, along with all their attributes and so on. So let's take a look at a few of these. I'm going to start off with this one down here, human resources, actually. And you'll see that we've got some kind of overview. If we look at the membership, we can see that we've got a lot of criteria-based members. What we've got is simply that there is a criteria rule, a criterion then, that says if the Department of Human Resources, they should be in this group. Very straightforward, just what you'd see in Azure. Difference here is that I can say that that person should not be included, should be an exception, and I can add an exception of my own. We'll choose this guy with the unlikely name of Alan Turing. So there's a couple of changes here which I'm going to submit. And you'll see all the time when I'm demoing, there are all sorts of other options there are not time to go into. It's very feature rich. Okay, let's now look at some of these other ones. Let's look at a simple request membership group. So this is a group which has no members at all at the moment. And there is nothing here to say how they should be included. You've got no criterion, but somebody can request access to this, and there will be a basic owner approval. Now, I can't go into this, but that is a policy that's been defined elsewhere that can have all sorts of stuff going on behind it, but it's what it says. It's a basic owner approval. Let's look at another one. Let's look at a self-service just-in-time group. So this one, again, there are no current members in the sense of active, but we've got two explicit candidates. These explicit candidates have been explicitly entered. That means they've simply been manually entered by administrator. And so these people could ask for access. Will they get access? Well, there is a self-approved 8-hour activation. So they can activate for up to 8 hours. They can specify less than that and simply do that off their own bat. Let's now look at our just-in-time assigned group. So this is where, again, we've got manual assignments of candidates, and this time we've got an activation policy which is an owner-approved 8-hour activation. These policies are all policies which we've defined, and there's huge flexibility in how you define them and what they do. No time to show you that. And the last one I want to show you is the criterion-based one. So here we have a whole bunch of people that are candidate members as a result of a criterion, and the criterion down here is that they are a member of the information technology group department, and again there is an owner approved 8-hour activation. Okay, so what is it that happens with these? Well, if try and find my appropriate window, it doesn't want to move. There we go. So here we have somebody whose name is Antonio Borre, I suppose that is. So here he is, we're logged in as him. He sees some of his details. He also sees some access that he can request. Now he might have a big list. I've only included the 3 that I showed you. And I'm going to have him request all 3 of these. So we see what happens with them. And there's a bit more information I have to put in. First of all, I have to say, well, how long do we want it for? So I'll say an hour. And I'll say an hour for all of them. I mean, you know, obviously I could put a different time in for them. And the other thing is that I have to provide a justification. Well, I'm just going to put in because we need to be quick here. And last one down here. And we'll submit that. Now, what you see straight away is that the self-service one, he's already got access. It's happened. And when I say it's happened, that's actually written straight out to Azure. And if we go and look in, well, we might as well do it. Let's go and look in Azure at the self-service group. Let's just do a refresh, make sure that we've got the latest stuff, and look at members. And with a bit of luck, well, okay, it hasn't happened yet. It's on its way. The workflow's happening. We'll see it in a moment. So we've got. So that's already happened. These haven't happened because we need it to be agreed by our group owner, the group owner in this case. The group owner is Frodo. Here he is. I'm signed in here as Frodo, and he's got some details here. If I refresh, if he comes in fresh, he's going to see that he's got some actions to do here. And I realize I've forgotten something, so I'm just going to quickly go back and do one more thing. Probably why I just got my timing wrong, actually. I'm going to go into resources and look at another resource, let's look at this request membership group here. This one he can join in a slightly different way. This is not a temporary activation. He's requesting to join this, so it's a different interface, and he can give his justification for that and submit that. Okay, I meant to do that before, sorry. Let's go back to Frodo, refresh, and I think we're going to expect to see yes. So he could approve that. He could approve perhaps this one. And let's say that he rejects this one for the sake of argument. So now we've made quite a few changes to ownerships. Now, those of you that came to the Hypersync panel webinar will know that there is the concept of doing some kind of a synchronization. And in the background, synchronization is going to be happening from time to time. And while just-in-time things need to happen straight away, there are slightly less critical things that only need to happen at the next synchronization. And it's something of a habit of mine, just for the sake of thoroughness, that even when it isn't necessary, to do my full synchronization, and also, I hope I did that, and also to do a scan. Again, not strictly necessary, but I want to make sure I've just read back what's gone into Azure. Now, I am hoping to see a change here. So let's refresh this. I'm still not finding any members of that, which might be that the gods of demo are not with me. So this one here, let's try this one. Nothing. Good measure. I'm going to do another full scan, and we'll see what happens. Just see if we can pick that up. And I'm going to do another full sync. Okay, let's go back and see if anything has happened. Right, I apologize that I'd allowed something to break in the background, and one of the essential processes was not happening. Antonio has got access to his just-in-time assigned group. There was a self-service group he's also a member of, and a request membership group he's also a member of, but we didn't give him access to the fourth one here. That was the criterion group, and hopefully he's not a member of that. Also, you may remember one other thing we did was that we went into the human resources one, and we took a person out. You may not remember their name, but I can assure you they've gone. And Alan Turing was the person we added, and he's now in. So it's all worked according to plan, except for one broken piece of the puzzle. If I now go back to Access Panel and I look at some of these, for example, if I look at this one here, you'll see that amongst the explicit candidates, we've got one who actually has been given completely explicit access now for some reason. And if we look at one of the others, like let's have the access to self-service one here, he'll see that this guy has been given access, whereas this one's still a candidate access. So that's some of the ways in which we can give manage who has access to what. What about campaigns then? So as an admin here, I've initiated a campaign. This was initiated on June the 11th. It's a quarterly access review, and so we've got it happening again in a quarter's time, but it's already in process. And I can't get too involved with all the different settings for this, but if I look at the details, you'll see that we've got 228 access instances that we want to somebody to review. Who reviews it? Well, it depends on the ownership of the group or whatever it is we're dealing with, and depends on, and it could be others that are involved as well. The owner of the application, for example, or the owner of a role, or whatever it is. And they don't, as a rule, all get sent out at the same time. We are actually meeting them out in batches, and so they haven't even all gone out yet. We've got a number of them pending send. We've got lots of them waiting for a response because I have only actually responded to a very small number of them here, 2 approved, 3 rejected, rather a lot of them to go. Some of them could have been escalated, some of them could have failed perhaps, some of them might have expired. Well, they would typically expire all at the same time. I've got a campaign going, I'm monitoring its progress. If I look at tasks, I'll see that actually it turns out that some of the tasks are mine. So I can approve or reject from here. If I go and look at another owner, we'll see that he also has things that he might approve or reject. I'll just refresh there. It's got rid of the other panels there. And he also has to approve or reject. And it could be done right from here. And depending on how we've configured it, when he approves, it may ask for some kind of a justification. Again, I'm going to be a bit boring about that. It might be that that has really immediately applied that, or it might be that it's done other things. It could have sent out a report, it could have sent an email. Basically, it can hook into the workflow engine and do whatever we want it to do. The other possibility is that it was done by email. Somebody receives an email. Now, this email isn't a real one that's been sent to one of our resources because we don't have it configured properly to do that. But this is the email that they would receive, and they can, right from here, approve or reject. So this guy, Suleiman, we could do an approve here, and we'll go straight into that assignment, put in a justification, submit it, or whatever. So that hopefully gives you an idea, a flavor of campaigns. Campaigns can be set up in all sorts of different ways, and it's an awful lot to go into now. So that all said, I want to go back to these key points. Cloud-based by design, many ways to manage entitlements. So we looked at criteria, we looked at exceptions to those. We didn't look at role-based access control or segregation of duties, but we certainly saw user requests and just-in-time. Resources can be grouped, often are, but they can be configured in other ways. All sorts of flexible options for review campaigns. Now, I didn't talk about these last 2 things, so I'll mention them now. First of all, the security that we've talked about in all of the applications is pervasive and granular. Here, you can only see the things that you're allowed to see. So you will have noticed that the experience of the different levels of person I was signed in at was different. They saw different options. And then you've got the other point, which is that while many of these things can be done within a particular application, or even something as big as Azure AD, this is enterprise-wide. So everything that we can connect to, everything that we can pull data in from, which is just about anything, we can then configure entitlements to appear as resources that we can then manage within Access Panel. So important to see that it's enterprise-wide. We have finally, what's next? Any further questions, email me. Forward a link of the recording to your colleagues if you think they might be interested. Email me, and I think we're going to put up a poll. You can email me if you'd like a discussion about your particular needs, a personalized demonstration where we can go into much more detail. You can also see recordings of previous webinars at our website. Look out for more webinars. We'll be no doubt contacting you both about those too. Apology for the glitches that happened in that. I won't believe how many times I demoed that. I practiced it, but you know, sometimes it just goes wrong on the day. And what I would also say is I'm not going to be able to answer your questions in the time available because I use up too much time fixing it. But I will certainly get back to you all individually. So don't know whether our poll was complete, but yes, I think it was. Very interesting. And thank you very much, everybody, and see you on another webinar, I hope. Bye-bye.